Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. Today I've got another pretty quick video where I'm going to show you my process of drawing shiny metallic objects. And for this video I've got, as you can see, a shiny spoon here, and I'm going to show you how I would draw this anyway. I'll take you through my process of drawing metallic objects so that they look glossy and that they look metallic, because it's something that some people really struggle with in getting a reflective surface and making it actually look believable and realistic. So to start off with, I've got the little outline here. I did that quick off camera to save a minute. I've got the outline of our spoon, and I am first going to go ahead and draw in this little pattern here, and I'm not going to focus too much on making it perfect, because really the object isn't to draw a spoon, but to show you guys how to draw metallic looking objects. So let me just put in these little patterns here real quick. Okay, so I basically got those lines in there, that design. So what I do when I'm drawing anything metallic, whether it's something super reflective like this, or whether it's a metal that has a different color like copper, or even a brushed metal, like down here you can see that, oh, I just moved the thing. Down here you can see that it's a little bit smoother, it's not quite as glossy, and it's got a different texture on it. So what I do to start with is sort of go through and do just a base color. And even though it's super reflective and reflecting back most of the light, so you wouldn't really think that the surface would have a color necessarily, it does have sort of a base gray color. And I am going to start up here, actually, in the actual spoon part of the spoon, the mouth part of the spoon, and just gonna go ahead and really lightly fill this in with a light shade of gray. Okay, so as you can tell, that's really pretty light, but actually that is the way that it should be. It gives us a base tone to work from so that we can make sure that we make the shadows dark enough and the reflections and the highlights light enough. We have a midpoint here that we can use to make sure that this looks glossy and realistic the way that it should. So the next thing that I do when we're drawing a glossy metal like this, the real key to making it look shiny and to look glossy and reflective is, as you can see on the spoon itself, keeping the lines really sharp and having high contrast. So over here you see really dark, almost deep blacks next to this bright white highlight, and then a crisp kind of a middle gray color, almost, it's a little bit darker than this base that we have here. And all of the lines are really, really solid and crisp, and there's not a whole lot of gradation between the different colors or the different tones and values in the spoon, and that's what makes it look glossy and shiny and smooth. So what I'm going to do next is lightly outline where we have all of our lights and shadows at and our reflections. And when you're looking at something like a spoon like this, it really distorts just about everything. So it can be kind of confusing as to what you're actually looking at. So what I find is one of the best things to do is to not try to necessarily analyze, what is what here. What is this reflection? What is that bouncing off of? What am I looking at right there? Instead, when you're working off of a reference like this, it's easier to just kind of take your brain out of it and just draw everything exactly as you see it there, instead of trying to analyze what is casting all of these reflections and lights and shadows on the spoon or whatever metal surface is that you're drawing. So that's basically all I'm doing right here, is just drawing all of the reflections exactly as I see. Well, not as close to exactly as I see them as I can. And what you're seeing in the camera might be a little bit different than what I'm seeing, because I'm actually down a little bit further from the view, from the perspective of the camera. So my view might be a little bit different than yours, but I'm going to try to get it as close as I can. Okay, so when you do that, you wind up with something that looks sort of like this, and it looks really jagged and really kind of messy, and like you just threw in a bunch of lines for no reason. But once we start to add the different values, it'll start to make sense and start to look the way that it should look. So the next thing that I do is different from when I'm drawing basically any other thing, is that I go in with the darkest tones next. So everything along the outside here, this is really dark, aside from this little patch of highlight right there. And then this edge over here would be the next darkest value. So I'm going to go through in this sort of horseshoe shape, and I'm going to fill in everything that is the darkest tones first. Pretty messy at this point, but next I'm going to go in with the midtones. So that would be like this tone right here that kind of cuts down the center of the spoon, and then I'm going to fade some of those into this darker color. So over here you can see how it gradiates a little bit over into this other right hand part of the spoon, and it goes from dark to a little bit light over there. So next we're going to do that, go through with all of those midtones here. Okay, so we're starting to get there a little bit. If you noticed, I kind of went back through some of the sections that I had did the first time around, because when I was looking through the viewfinder on my camera, I realized that I did not go dark enough. So that's one other thing to keep in mind too, that when you're drawing things that are really reflective, black is like black. And I can't even get black enough here with a graphite pencil, because the darkest you can go is gray. So a black colored pencil would definitely help to add a little bit more depth and dimension and make it look a little bit more realistic. But for this, because we're just keeping it quick and simple, I'm just going to go as dark as I can with my pencils. Clear and very sharp. So I am going to outline the highlight a little bit, which is something that you don't usually do. You're kind of taught in realism that things don't have highlights, or excuse me, you're kind of taught that things don't have outlines. But this is one of those cases where you want to keep all the outlines as sharp as you can, because that just adds to the effect of it being glossy and reflective. So I am gonna pull everything in here quite a bit in toward this highlight and make the line pretty sharp. And I'm even going to darken this space to the left side of the highlight just to bring it out a little bit more. And I made this highlight a little bit too big actually, but I don't think for this it's going to matter too much, because it's still going to have the same effect anyway. Okay, so, and next what I'm going to do is, since we went over with that base in the very beginning of that sort of gray color, I'm going to take a kneaded eraser and try to pull up any more of that highlight or any more of that graphite that I can to make the highlight as white as possible. And I'm going to add a little bit more contrast down here just to help it stand out a little bit more. Not nearly perfect by any means. It's at least a pretty good start. Like I said, I can't go as dark as the actual spoon that's over here because this graphite doesn't go completely pitch black, so I'm working with what I have here. But that's basically the gist of it for this shiny part. So now I'm going to go ahead and do the handle, and I'm actually basically going to do the exact same thing that I did for the spoon, the mouth part of the spoon. So I'm going to go in and add a whole base layer here. I'm going to go ahead and add a whole base layer here of color to the spoon, just like we did the first time around. And that's just going to serve as a place marker for a base value across the whole thing. So again, so we know how light to go and how dark to go. We have a middle point to work from. And this part isn't really necessary. You don't have to do this, but I find that it helps me anyway. And I normally wouldn't be doing all these scribbly lines if I were actually trying to make something nice here, but I'm really just kind of slopping this together so you guys can get the gist of how it's done, and then you can practice that on your own. So next what I'm going to do is, again, we work from dark to light, so I'm going to go through and add the darkest parts and add the dark outlines of this circular design. Over here on camera, that this area in here in between these circles is like a brushed metal, sort of like a satin finish. I don't know what you actually call it, but it's more smooth, it's not really reflective, and then these actual rings are really shiny. So we need to mimic this on here, and this brushed metal works a little bit differently. It reflects light a little bit differently than the shiny parts. So I'm first going to get these rings out of the way, and we're going to do the same thing. So I've got the outline done. Now what we're going to do is actually bring out those outlines a little bit further in toward the center of the rings, so that instead of it just looking like an outline or a shadow, it's looking like there's a reflection that's stretching across the edges of those reflective rings, because really that's what it is. They're not shadows, they're reflections of whatever's black in the surroundings stretching across and curving along the lengths of these rings. So we're going to do that now. I'm going to do is go in and add the values of this brush metal in between these rings. And like I said, the brush metal is a little bit differently because it's a little different, and you're going to shade it differently because it's not reflective. So it's got this kind of smooth texture over top of it. So really it acts more like it has a matte finish, like well, like this kneaded eraser, I guess. The finish of it reflects light a little bit more smoothly. So instead of bouncing it back directly at you in very sharp reflections, the light hits this smooth surface and kind of radiates over it, just like really any other non-reflective surface would. So I have my light over here. It's kind of off camera, you can't see it. And the majority of the light is hitting the middle part of the handle here of the spoon. So this is going to be the brightest part over here. And then over here and over here on either end of the handle, those are going to be the darkest parts. So we're going to go ahead and add in all that shading right now. And what's going to be different here is that this shading is not going to be hard. It's going to be very smooth, and we're going to have really soft, smooth transitions between the darkest parts and the lightest parts. Basically the gist of it. Again, it's not the most perfect drawing, but I'm just trying to do a quick little thing here for you just to show you kind of the basic overview of how it works, how you achieve a glossy look and make it look like you're drawing metal. So just for fun, here in the end, I'm going to add a few more things. I think I'm going to take a white paint marker and kind of add some highlight because it's not quite white enough. And then I might take a black colored pencil and darken up the darkest colors a little bit too. So there you have it. That is basically how I draw metal and reflective objects. If you like this tutorial and you want to help support the channel, please feel free to give it a like and a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for more tutorials, and I will see you in the next one.